The Human Tardigrade, written and narrated by Graham Leggett. Introduction: Becoming the Human Tardigrade. There will come a time when the world collapses, when the systems you trust crumble, and when everything you thought was stable turns to dust. In that moment, there will be two kinds of people, those who shatter and those who remain standing. This book is for the latter. This is not a manual for the average mind. It is not for the fragile, the overly conditioned, or those seeking comfort. It is for those who seek total sovereignty, the ability to endure, adapt, and dominate any circumstance without being broken, enslaved, or erased. It is for those who understand that to thrive in an uncertain world, one must become untouchable, unbreakable, and unstoppable. The Human Tardigrade, the ultimate survivor. The tardigrade, a microscopic creature, can survive where no other life form can. It endures extreme heat, cold, radiation, vacuum, and pressure. It does not complain, does not falter, and does not need external validation. It simply survives and thrives. This book will teach you how to do the same, not just in body, but in mind, strategy, and presence. To be a human tardigrade is to embody extreme resilience, adaptability, and self-mastery. You are a paradox, both warrior and ghost, both predator and philosopher. You move unseen when needed, dominate when inclined, and survive under conditions that would destroy others. This is not about mere strength. Strength alone is primitive. The true tardigrade is more than strong. It is fluid, paradoxical, and beyond the reach of conventional tactics. The human tardigrade thrives in chaos and order, solitude and society, war and peace. It is an outsider, yet never without influence. The death of limits, the true meaning of self-ownership. Most people believe in the impossible. They accept limitation as a fundamental truth. They say, this cannot be done, without questioning if the constraints is real or merely a function of time and knowledge. The human tardigrade does not operate within these illusions. It does not ask, is this possible? It asks, how long until it is inevitable? In 1825, if you asked whether a man could free solo El Capitan, deadlift 500 kilograms, or run a marathon in under 2 hours, the answer would have been simply that it's physically impossible. And yet, these things have been done. Why? Because the limits were never real. They were only waiting for the right synthesis of knowledge, training, and mindset. If time alone solves a problem, then time is irrelevant. That means the impossible is already possible. It's simply waiting for someone to shatter the illusion. This is why self-ownership is more than just severing external control. It is severing the most fundamental lie of all, the belief in limitations. The human tardigrade does not wait for 100 years of progress to tell them what is possible. They collapse time into the present, embodying the future before the world realizes it is inevitable. What this book will do, this is not just a guide, it is a transformation. If you complete this book, you will emerge as someone who owns themselves fully, free from external control or moral programming, moves through society like a ghost, invisible when needed, dominant when necessary, masters paradox, navigating contradictions, recursion, and simulacra in real time, adapts to any challenge with an indomitable body and ruthlessly efficient mind, knows when to vanish, when to strike, and when to let others destroy themselves, and sees no true limits, only knowledge gaps waiting to be closed. Each chapter is designed to install a new mode of thinking and being. This is not passive reading. It is mental, strategic, and physical training. Some will not finish. Those who do will become something beyond human expectation. Who this book is not for. This book is not for the weak. It is not for those who seek comfort, emotional validation, or moral reassurance. It is for those who are ready to abandon illusion and take full ownership of their existence. If you are unwilling to discard false beliefs, to train your mind and body beyond their limits, and to see reality as it truly is, close this book now. If you are ready to step beyond fear, beyond hesitation, and beyond human limitation, then read on. The path begins now. Chapter 1, the first pillar, self-ownership. No external system can own what is untouchable. To master the human tardigrade archetype, you must first master your own mind. Before we can train the body, before we can navigate society's power structures, before we can implement deep strategic thinking, we must strip away every weakness that exists in the psyche. The prison of the average mind. Most people do not own themselves. Their thoughts, emotions, and actions are dictated by governments, ideologies, cultures, and social structures that have been programmed in them from birth. They operate under the illusion of free will, convinced that they are making independent choices when, in reality, they are following pre-installed scripts designed to keep them compliant, predictable, and powerless. Society is a machine, and the average individual is a cog within it. They are trained to believe in external authority, to accept predefined moral structures, and to fear stepping outside of what is deemed acceptable. The human tardigrade recognizes this for what it is, a system of servitude masquerading as freedom. The first revelation of the human tardigrade. You do not own yourself unless you break every chain you were born into. The invisible cage, how people are programmed into servitude. From the moment you are born, you are conditioned to think, feel, and behave within the boundaries of pre-existing structures. National identity, religious doctrine, cultural expectations, political affiliations, etc. You are given a name, a nationality, a legal status, and a set of values before you are even capable of rational thought. By the time you are old enough to question, your worldview is already manufactured. This is not a conspiracy. It is the nature of all civilizations. A functioning society requires control, and control requires predictable individuals. The vast majority accept their programming without resistance. They defend the very structures that limit them, unable to conceive of life outside of their mental prison. The illusion of free will is the most effective form of control. If a slave believes they are free, they will never seek to escape. Reactive versus directive beings, understanding your true position. There are two types of individuals in this world. Reactive beings, those who respond to external forces, never truly initiating their own trajectory. And directive beings, those who bend reality to their will, shaping their own fate. The average person is reactive. Their emotions, decisions, and identities are dictated by the news cycle, social approval, political trends, economic conditions, and external expectations. Their belief in personal agency is an illusion. They are merely responding to stimuli, following programming that was written for them. The human tardigrade refuses to be reactive. To achieve true self-ownership, one must become the cause, never the effect. The first act of true sovereignty is this: recognizing that you do not yet own yourself. Until you have dismantled the layers of inherited belief, severed your dependence on external validation, and taken full control of your thoughts, emotions, and actions, you are not your own master. You are the product of forces beyond your awareness. This is where the process begins. The human tardigrade sees the prison for what it is and begins the process of escape. The chains of control. To break free, you must first understand what binds you. Every system of power relies on a series of psychological chains to maintain control over individuals. These chains are not physical. They are mental, emotional, and social constructs designed to keep you within a predefined role. Until these chains are identified and dismantled, true autonomy remains an illusion. The four primary chains that restrict human sovereignty are, number 1, moral conditioning. The implanted belief that certain thoughts and actions are good or evil rather than simply effective or ineffective. Number 2, social validation loops. The unconscious compulsion to seek approval and avoid disapproval, making you dependent on external validation. Number 3, fear-based programming. the manipulation of fear to control behavior, fear of failure, fear of pain, fear of rejection. And number 4, the illusion of impossibility, the belief that some things are inherently unachievable, even when time alone would prove otherwise. These chains do not require guards, walls, or weapons. They exist within the mind, and that's what makes them so insidious. A person who does not see their chains will never attempt to break them. A person who believes their chains are natural will defend them. The human tardigrade does neither. Freedom does not come from fighting external forces. It comes from breaking the internal illusions. Each of these chains will now be dissected, exposed, and dismantled. Prepare to confront the reality of your conditioning and reclaim what was always yours, yourself. The art of severance, dismantling the chains one by one. Recognizing the chains is not enough. Awareness without action is the same as servitude. The human tardigrade does not simply acknowledge its conditioning, it destroys it. This section provides the precise steps required to sever each chain, ensuring that self-ownership is not just an idea, but an irreversible transformation. Step-by-step exercises to systematically destroy external programming. Number 1, the audit of ownership. List every belief, value, or behavior that dictates your life. Ask, did I choose this or was this installed in me? If it was installed, question its purpose. Who benefits from you believing this? Number 2, the external influence purge. Conduct a 7-day detox from all external programming, news, social media, entertainment, and conversations that reinforce societal norms. Document how your thoughts shift when external input is silenced. Number 3, the morality reassessment. Take an action that contradicts a programmed belief, yet causes no harm. Analyze your emotional response. Did guilt, fear, or discomfort arise? Realize that these emotions are the residue of conditioning, not indicators of truth. And number 4, the validation fast. For one week, refuse to seek validation for any decision, action, or opinion. Track how often you would have typically sought approval. Learn how to move through life without the need for external reinforcement. Mental rewiring techniques to ensure self-ownership is internalized permanently. Neural override method. Repeatedly expose yourself to situations that trigger old programming but actively choose a different response. Identity reconstruction. Craft a new personal philosophy, one that is chosen, not inherited, and document it as your personal internal law. Reality testing. Every time a belief arises, ask, is this mine or was it given to me? If it was given, it is discarded unless consciously readopted. The brutal truth, this is irreversible. Once you see the chains, you can never unsee them. The moment you engage in the art of severance, you will never fit into conventional society again. You will see manipulation where others see guidance. You will recognize programming where others see truth. This is the price of freedom. The average mind cannot handle it, but you are not the average mind. The ritual of severance, your first true test. The final test of self-ownership is not theoretical. It is not a belief. It is a moment of action, an irreversible step that severs the old identity from the new. This is the point where you cease to be who you were and step into total sovereignty. Rituals exist for a reason. Transformation requires an act of finality. Without a defining moment, the mind will attempt to revert to comfort. The ritual of severance ensures there is no return. The purpose of the ritual. The mind clings to old programming, no matter how much you intellectually reject it. To fully step into self-ownership, you must engage in a deliberate, symbolic act that burns the bridge between who you were and who you are becoming. This ritual is not for show. It is not a gimmick. It must be real. It must create a distinct psychological event, a point of no return. The elements of the ritual. There are 3 required elements for the ritual of severance to be effective. Number 1, a symbolic destruction. You must destroy something that represents your former self. This could be an object tied to your past, an old belief system or fear written on paper and burned, or a public renunciation of an external identity that has controlled you. Number 2, a commitment of action. Severance is not passive. You must take physical action that marks your transformation. This could be walking away from a toxic environment without looking back, shaving your head as a mark of rebirth, making a vow in writing and sealing it as a permanent act. 3, the trial of endurance. True transformation requires resilience. You must endure physical or psychological hardship that challenges your old limits. This could be fasting for 24 to 72 hours to reclaim dominance over physical urges, withstanding controlled discomfort, cold exposure, intense exertion, or pain to solidify mental fortitude, isolation and increasingly extended silence and darkness to break the need for external input, or all of the above in combination as a rite of passage, extended retreats in isolated nature, especially in a harsh environment without food and minimal water, the bare minimum for survival. Severing the last chain. The final part of the ritual is a declaration, written, spoken, or physically enacted, that signifies you are no longer the person you once were. This is your rebirth into full sovereignty. Most will never do this. Most will hesitate at the threshold and retreat back into comfort. This is why most will remain slaves to the systems that own them. But you will step forward. You will sever the final chain. You will emerge untouchable. Chapter 2, The Fractal War, Mastering Recursion, Perception, and Reality. The hidden machinery of reality. Reality is not a straight line. It is a fractal, a self-repeating recursive system where patterns emerge at every level of existence. Everything from nature to human psychology, from the rise and fall of civilizations to the neurological structure of the brain, is built on loops, cycles, and self-referencing structures. Most people never see this. They move through life assuming events are linear, that time flows in one direction, that their thoughts, behaviors, and circumstances are original rather than predictable echoes of deeper patterns. They are trapped inside invisible cycles, repeating the same thoughts, making the same mistakes, falling into the same emotional traps, never realizing that they are reliving programmed loops rather than experiencing true agency. You are either mastering recursion or being controlled by it. There is no in between. How recursion enslaves the unaware. Thought loops. Most people have the same thoughts every day, trapped in cycles of doubt, fear, or distraction. Their mind is a closed circuit, reinforcing its own limitations. Behavioral loops. Society rewards repetition. People fall into routines, work, consume, sleep, repeat, never questioning whether they are evolving or merely sustaining a cycle imposed upon them. Historical loops. Nations rise and fall in predictable sequences. Economic crashes, ideological conflicts, cultural revolutions, all follow the same recursive rhythms. Identity loops. People play the same roles in life, dictated by social expectations. They rarely rewrite their identity from the ground up. The human tardigrade sees recursion for what it is, a tool, not a prison. Where the average mind is controlled by loops, the tardigrade learns to step outside them, manipulate them, or harness them for power. The first act of power is seeing the pattern. The second act is choosing how to interact with it. Unlike the average mind, the human tardigrade does not passively exist inside recursion. It dictates its relationship to recursion, deciding when to step outside of loops entirely, which we detailed in Metamorphosis Brahman. It's an escape. Use loops against themselves for power, which we detailed in Ortis Aletheia. It's the power of harnessing. And become the synthesis of the dialectic and system itself. And this is what we detailed in Apeiron Genesis. Understanding recursion is the key to breaking free from invisible prisons, controlling external reality, and rewriting one's place within the larger system of existence. This is the battleground and most never even realize they are fighting a war. The next section reveals the 3 paths of power, how to escape, harness, or synthesize recursion for ultimate mastery. The 3 paths of power. Recursion is neither good nor bad. It is a force. Like gravity, fire, or time, it is neutral, but its effects depend entirely on how one interacts with it. Most people do not interact with recursion at all. They are swept up into its loops, obeying patterns they do not see. The human tardigrade, however, is different. It chooses its relationship to recursion. There are 3 primary ways to engage recursion, each leading to a different form of power. These are the 3 paths of power. Number 1, escaping recursion, as we detailed in Metamorphosis Brahman, the path of liberation. Breaking all cycles and stepping beyond illusion. Some loops cannot be controlled, only left behind. To escape recursion is to detach entirely, to refuse participation in the games of power, validation, and control that define society. This is the path of those who seek total liberation, the ability to exist without being dictated by external forces. What this looks like: recognizing the illusory nature of identity, desire, and control, severing attachments to external validation, moral constraints, and imposed expectations. Moving beyond simulacra, no longer engaging with the world as dictated by conditioned perception. And mastering detachment, internal completeness, and radical self-reliance. Who walks this path? The Zen master or the Taoist immortal who sees through the illusion of self while maintaining existential engagement with life ever tethered to the Tao. The hermit who abandons societal narratives to live in pure awareness. And the philosopher who recognizes that all meaning is assigned, not inherent. The power of this path: unshackled will, freedom from all external manipulation. Unbreakable autonomy, you are bound by nothing and no one. Perfect clarity, seeing reality as it is, unfiltered by illusion. 2, harnessing recursion, or dysaletheia, the path of mastery. Using the loops of reality to amplify power and influence. Instead of escaping, one can control recursion, using its loops to create compounding advantage. This is the path of the strategist, the tactician, the one who bends reality by understanding its predictable cycles and leveraging them. What this path looks like: mastering social, financial, and psychological recursion to create systems that work for you. Using power dynamics to influence, manipulate, and anticipate outcomes. Mastering feedback loops, leveraging each small action to create exponential results. Rewriting perception, controlling information flow, and shaping belief structures. Who walks this path? The entrepreneur who builds wealth by compounding strategic advantage. The military tactician who anticipates enemy movements through cyclical analysis. And the master manipulator who weaponizes social recursion for influence. The power of this path: reality distortion, reshaping perception to fit your objectives. Strategic omniscience, predicting outcomes by understanding hidden patterns. And compounding influence, small moves can turn into unstoppable momentum. And finally, number 3, synthesizing recursion, the human tardigrade, the path of creation, becoming the architect of reality itself. The final path is neither escape nor control, it is creation. Instead of stepping outside the system or manipulating it, one becomes the system, designing new structures of power, perception, and existence. This is the path of gods, visionaries, and architects of the new worlds. What this path looks like: designing new recursive loops that define reality for others, creating belief systems, ideologies, and structures of thought that become self-sustaining, merging detachment and mastery to transcend personal power into external reality, and writing new paradigms that replace the old, becoming the source of recursion itself, not just its participant. Who walks this path? The religious founder who reshapes civilization. The artist or writer whose vision rewrites cultural consciousness. And the innovator who introduces an entirely new mode of existence. The power of this path, godlike authority. Reality conforms to the systems you create. Metaphysical sovereignty. You define meaning, laws, and frameworks for others. And total existential mastery. You are no longer reacting to reality. You are creating it. The recursive inception, imprinting axioms without detection. At its core, this method works because belief structures are not static. They are built on recursive foundations. Most people believe their thoughts are their own, but in truth, they are derivatives of conversations, influences, and structures they have absorbed. The key realization is this: if belief is recursive, then the recursion itself can be hijacked. This method exploits three fundamental cognitive vulnerabilities. Mirroring and rapport. People naturally reflect the behaviors and thoughts of those they interact with. Subconscious integration of incomplete ideas. When given an incomplete axiom, the mind fills in the gap on its own. And the illusion of self-generated thought. If someone arrives at a conclusion without realizing they were led there, they believe it is their own. By leveraging these principles, one can implant axioms beneath conscious awareness, shaping thought and structures at their root level. The four-stage process of ontological inception. Number 1, mirroring as the Trojan horse, establishing a reciprocal dialectic. Number 2, presenting an incomplete axiom, allowing the mind to self-complete the thought. Number 3, recursive reinforcement, layering feedback loops to strengthen the belief. And number 4, the illusion of origination, ensuring they believe it was always their own idea. Stage 1, mirroring as the Trojan horse. The surest way to shape a mind is to let it believe it remains independent. At the surface level, mirroring builds rapport. It makes the subject feel comfortable, as if their thoughts are being reflected back to them. However, the true function of mirroring in ontological inception is not just comfort, it is fusion. The moment two minds begin to mirror each other, the boundary of self begins to erode. The subject assumes mutuality. They believe you are aligning with their worldview, when in reality, you are setting the foundation to reshape it. You do not impose ideas directly. Instead, you subtly guide the dialectic in a way that makes them reinforce what you intend without them realizing it. This is the Trojan horse. Once the mind accepts you as part of its internal logic, it no longer detects foreign input as external manipulation. Stage 2, presenting an incomplete axiom. A void in the mind must be filled. It is in its nature. The real key to inception is not giving a complete thought, but an incomplete one. Why? Because the mind abhors incompleteness. The moment it perceives an unresolved structure, it must resolve it. And it will resolve it in the way that best fits the existing cognitive structure. Example, instead of saying the world is a simulation, you say, you ever notice how physics is structured exactly like a computational framework, and that our sensory perceptions are entirely dependent on neural processing? You do not state the axiom directly. You create a gap in their understanding, a missing piece that their mind must complete on its own. Why does this work? They are not rejecting your idea. They are completing it on their own. If they complete the thought, they take ownership of it. Once the mind resolves an axiom, it is no longer questioned. It becomes foundational. The true inception is not giving someone a belief, but making them construct the belief themselves. Stage 3, recursive reinforcement, layering feedback loops. Once the subject has accepted the seed of the new axiom, the next step is to create self-reinforcing recursion, to make them repeat it internally and externally without direct instruction. How? By subtly prompting them to reinforce the idea in conversation, writing, or thought. Example strategy. Number 1, ask them to explain their insight back to you. The more they articulate it, the more they believe it. 2, tie it to an existing belief they already hold. That actually fits perfectly with what you've always said about X, Y, or Z. This makes the new axiom feel internally consistent rather than imposed. Number 3, introduce indirect reinforcement sources. I just read something about this that reminded me of what you were saying. This makes them believe their new belief is independently corroborated. Stage 4, the illusion of origination. The final trick of Inception is to make them forget you ever played a role. For an implanted axiom to truly take hold, it must feel as if it was always theirs. If they remember the source, they may question it. If they believe it originated from their own cognition, it becomes inviolable. The final stage is to withdraw yourself from the equation, allowing the belief to take on a life of its own. Methods of erasing the source. Pass the insight off as their own idea early. That's exactly what you were saying last week, even if they never said it. Make them articulate it to others. That's a great way of putting it. How would you explain it to someone else? Ensure future reinforcement comes from external sources. I saw a book on this that aligns with what you've been saying. Once the mind believes it has originated the thought itself, it no longer questions it. The grand implication, the mind as a self-propagating system. What is reality if not a set of axioms you were given before you knew they were given to you? Every human mind is a recursive system, constantly reinforcing its own foundational axioms without knowing where they came from. You did not choose the language you think in. You did not choose the values you were first taught. You did not choose the axioms that form your perception of truth, but they govern you nonetheless. The Human Tardigrade recognizes that belief itself is a malleable construct. They do not merely navigate reality, they implant reality into others. This is the recursive inception method, a tool of absolute influence, the ability to reshape minds without resistance, without coercion, and without awareness. Final insights, the unseen control of thought. The most powerful ideas are not argued, they are assumed. The most lasting beliefs are not imposed, they are generated internally. Control of reality begins with control of the axioms that shape perception. If you can seed an incomplete thought into a mind, you can let it finish the process on its own. Reality is not about what is true. Reality is about what is believed. Which path do you choose? Every action, every thought, and every decision falls into one of 3 modes. Stepping outside the loop, metamorphosis Brahman. Harnessing the loop, ortis aletheia. Or becoming the loop's architect, the human tardigrade. The human tardigrade is not bound to one path. It shifts between them at will, adapting to whatever the moment requires. But to master recursion, you must first understand which path you are walking. The laws of recursive mastery. To control recursion, one must understand its governing principles. These laws are not abstract. They are the hidden mechanisms of reality itself. And those who wield them hold power over perception, influence, and existence itself. There are 3 fundamental laws that dictate how recursion operates. The first law, every system creates its own blind spots. Those inside a system cannot see beyond it. Those outside can control it. Every structure, whether a belief system, a government, an economic model, or a psychological framework, creates its own areas of blindness. Those who operate within a system can only perceive what the system allows them to see. How this law is used. The human tardigrade identifies the blind spots of any structure and exploits them. Instead of engaging in direct conflict, it moves where the system cannot perceive. Those who dictate the boundaries of a system control those trapped within it. Application. Find what a system refuses to acknowledge, and you will find its greatest weakness. Learn to operate outside the range of perception, to become untouchable. The second law, the observer changes the observed. Perception dictates reality. Control perception, and you control reality. At the quantum level, reality itself changes based on observation. This principle applies not only to physics, but to human psychology, social dynamics, and personal transformation. How this law is used. Redirect attention to control perception. What is seen defines what is real. Frame information strategically. By shifting the reference point, the outcome is altered. Use social and cognitive recursion. When people believe a narrative, it self-replicates. Application. The human tardigrade does not simply react to events, it engineers perception. It creates its own mythology, controls its narrative, and ensures its reality is acknowledged. The third law. Power belongs to those who dictate the reference point. Frames are more important than facts. Control the frame, and you control the outcome. People don't have ideas. Ideas have people. Reality is not objective. It is shaped by the reference point from which it is viewed. Whoever controls the reference point controls the entire system. How this law is used. The human tardigrade chooses its own frame of reality. It does not inherit one. Instead of arguing inside a frame, it reconstructs the argument entirely. Those who control the definition of power, value, or morality dictate the world. Application. Identify who controls the frame of reference in any scenario, then shift it. Refuse to play by imposed rules. Rewrite the game instead of following it. Mastering these three laws allows complete control over recursion. It ensures that one is never trapped inside a system, always aware of perception's influence, and fully capable of shaping reality itself. The next step will provide practical exercises to install these principles into your perception and behavior. Training perception to see recursion in action. A loop unseen is a trap. A loop recognized is a tool. Exercise 1. The cycle audit. For 1 week, document all patterns in your daily life. Thought loops, social interactions, financial decisions, emotional cycles. Identify which are self-repeating and unconscious versus which are intentional and leveraged. Break one useless loop and reinforce one useful one each day. Exercise 2. The observer's shift. Engage in social interactions or debates and consciously shift your reference point. Observe how it alters your responses. Change one frame of reference in an argument, negotiation, or conversation and measure its effects. Manipulate an expectation by shifting attention. What is seen defines what is real. Shattering identity loops. What you think you are is another loop. Rewrite it. Exercise 3. Identity deconstruction. Write down 5 core traits or beliefs that define your identity. Ask, where did these come from? Were they chosen or were they given? Select one trait or one belief and completely invert it for a day, exploring the mind of its opposite. Exercise 4. Self-reinvention trial. Create a new persona, a new name, behavior set, and mannerisms. Operate in this identity in a new environment. Observe how the world shifts in response to this change. Recognize that identity is fluid and self-perception is a recursive feedback loop. Recursive adaptation training. He who controls the feedback loop controls growth. Exercise 5. The exponential mastery protocol. Choose one skill, discipline, or habit to refine. Implement a daily recursive improvement strategy. Each day, refine one aspect by 1% or more. Document how small controlled recursions compound into exponential growth. Exercise 6. Sensory rewiring. Deprive or overload one of your senses for a controlled period. Example, close your eyes and sit in a crowded area. Then wear earplugs in a crowd. Observe how your mind compensates, restructuring perception to reinterpret reality differently. Realize that perception is mutable, and through recursion, it can be rewritten at will. Final integration, the recursive warrior's oath. From this moment, I no longer react blindly to loops. I see them, I control them, I create them. Write a personal commitment statement outlining how you will interact with recursion moving forward. Recite it daily for 30 days. Reinforcing the recursive loop of mastery itself. Recognize that this is not a one-time change. This is a self-replicating transformation. With these exercises, recursion is no longer a passive force controlling you. It is a tool to wield with intention. The human tardigrade does not live inside these loops. It moves beyond them, bends them, and forges its own path. The recursive warrior's oath. From this moment forward, I refuse to be trapped in loops I do not choose. The final step is commitment. Mastering recursion is not a singular event. It is a lifelong recursive process. Every day presents new loops, new frames of perception, new chances to either be controlled or take control. The human tardigrade does not hope to escape recursion. It ensures it never falls prey to it again. The oath of recursive mastery. I see the loops. I control the loops. I create the loops. I will never again be blindly dictated to by cycles I do not choose. Every pattern I engage in will be by my own intention, not by programming. I move beyond linear thought. I exist outside the machine. From this moment forward, I am the architect of my own reality. Final trial, the ritual of recursive awareness. This is not merely an intellectual exercise. It must be physically and mentally embodied. The final trial is designed to cement recursive mastery into your very being. Step 1. Enter a situation you have repeated before. Find a recurring pattern in your life, an argument, a habit, a reaction. Before engaging, stop and analyze the recursion in action. Choose to break the pattern or harness it for your own advantage. Step 2. Create a new intentional recursive loop. Construct a daily habit or ritual that will reinforce recursive mastery. This could be a morning mental framework, a strategy for information processing, or a system for decision making. Ensure that it compounds over time, generating greater results with each cycle. Step 3. Sever one useless loop permanently. Identify one cycle that has kept you trapped, whether mental, emotional, fear-based, or behavioral. Meditate on it. Instead of avoiding it, actively confront it. If it takes increments, then take increments, as long as you are stretching your capacity every time. For example, if it is fear-based, those who irrationally fear elevators, for example, should first see and approach an elevator. Next, touch the elevator door. Next time, enter the elevator and step out. Next time, press the button and step out. Next time, take it up or down one floor. Then take the full ride. If you are game, eliminate as many increments as possible without stretching too far at once that it reinforces the recursive loop. As long as you are making progress, you are succeeding at rewriting the loop. Destroy it deliberately. Take a concrete action that ensures it cannot return. If the cycle had controlled and defined your life, for example, if you avoided jobs that required elevator rides, then seek out a job that requires you to take the elevator every day. The elevator is just an easy to explain example. It obviously does not have to be an elevator. Everyone has their version of the elevator. Destroy that loop. Take agency over it. You are in control. Feel the psychological shift, the proof that you are in control of recursion, not the other way around. Closing words. The final test of recursion mastery is not what you understand. It is what you do. If you do not act, you remain a slave to the loop that you did not choose. If you take control, you become untouchable. The human tardigrade does not wait for the world to dictate its fate. It sees the cycles, controls the patterns, and dictates its own evolution. The fractal war is won not by resisting recursion, but by mastering it. Chapter 3. The Resilient Machine. Redefining the limits of endurance and pain. The death of comfort. Why hardship is the greatest strength. The body is weak because the mind allows it to be. The tardigrade does not seek comfort. It seeks indomitability. Modern life has engineered weakness into the human condition. Societies have built systems of comfort, removing adversity and ensuring that people remain fragile, dependent, and docile. From air-conditioned rooms to soft beds, from processed food to instant gratification, people have lost the ability to endure. But the human tardigrade thrives where others break. It does not seek pain for its own sake. it weaponizes suffering to become something more than human. Pain is not an enemy, it is a forge. The comfort trap, how weakness is engineered. The human nervous system adapts to ease, making discomfort seem unbearable. Society rewards fragility. Emotional hypersensitivity is treated as a strength. People avoid pain instead of using it, leading to a perpetual state of avoidance. The mind, when left unchallenged, atrophies like an unused muscle. The tardigrade refuses this programming. Instead of being controlled by discomfort, it rewires its nervous system to embrace it. Hardship as the ultimate growth catalyst. Every challenge is an opportunity to build resilience. Those who master pain become unshakable, mentally, physically, and emotionally. Adversity is not something to be endured. It is something to seek, control, and conquer. The mind and the body evolve only under stress. The first trial, reclaiming control over pain. Cold exposure. Subject the body to extreme cold and control the mind's response. Controlled fasting. Teach the body that hunger does not mean weakness. Physical hardship. Engage in deliberate discomfort. Extended exertion, ultramarathons, extreme endurance tests. Mental fortitude training. Do one thing that you avoid every day. Embrace discomfort as a tool. Sit down and work on a project for an extended period of time until your mind begs for a recursively habitual dopamine hit, such as checking your social media or grabbing a snack. Ignore it and keep working. Focus training. Go to the noisiest public place you can find. Meditate. Shut off all external stimulus and quiet the mind. Silence the crowd. Then pick out a single conversation or sound and focus on it while muting the rest. Switch between conversations or sounds at will, muting and bringing into focus the new stimulus. Begin to do this more rapidly, honing your focus to your own will. The weak flee from suffering, the strong embrace it. The indomitable forge themselves in it. Pain is not something to fear, it is the doorway to total resilience. The human tardigrade feels nothing as suffering breaks against it, powerless. Training for indestructibility, rewiring the mind and body. The mind breaks before the body does. Control the mind and the body follows. Most people believe in limits because they have never tested them. The human tardigrade does not assume, it proves. The body is capable of far more than the average person will ever know because they have been conditioned to quit too soon. To truly become indestructible, one must rewire the response to stress, pain, and adversity. This is not just about enduring suffering, it is about eliminating its power over you. The science of limit breaking. The central governor theory suggests brain imposes artificial limitations long before the body reaches failure. Pain is not an indicator of true limits, it is the body's way of maintaining homeostasis. Enduring is more than mental and physical. For those who train their mind can push far beyond the impossible, quote unquote. Fear of discomfort is what weakens people, not discomfort itself. The human tardigrade sees pain as data, a neural signal, not a command. It does not react emotionally to discomfort, it simply adapts. Tactical endurance protocols. The tardigrade threshold test. Push and exercise, running, lifting, holding a position, past where you would normally stop. Go 30% beyond failure. The daily hardship rule. Engage in one difficult task every day, mental, physical, or emotional. Pain reframing meditation. Sit with discomfort. Instead of resisting, observe it. Recognize it as a mere sensation, not suffering. Controlled breathwork for stress mastery. Use deliberate breathing techniques, Wim Hof, box breathing, Tumo, etc., to override panic responses. Embrace physical discomfort as baseline. Choose hardship, cold showers, fasting, extreme endurance challenges, fear engagement, etc. Becoming unshakable, training the nervous system. Nerve conditioning. Gradually expose yourself to physical extremes, heat, cold, pain, until they become normal. Emotional immunity drills. Train yourself to remain completely unfazed under high pressure, chaotic, or stressful conditions. Psychological callousing. Regularly confront and overcome mentally grueling tasks to make them routine. Stoic practice. Strip away all luxuries for short periods to develop complete detachment from external comfort. The mind and body only obey those who have proven they deserve command. By rewiring the nervous system, pain loses its meaning, fear loses its grip, and adversity becomes fuel. The human tardigrade does not suffer, it adapts. The antifragile body, thriving through stress and damage. What does not kill me makes me stronger, if I use it correctly. Most people think resilience means enduring hardship and returning to baseline. This is not enough. The human tardigrade does not simply endure. It becomes stronger from stress, adapting beyond previous limitations. This is the principle of antifragility, the ability not just to withstand adversity, but grow from it. Unlike a fragile system, which breaks under stress, or a resilient system, which resists but remains unchanged, an anti-fragile system benefits from disorder, chaos, and pressure. Breaking the traditional recovery myth. The modern world glorifies rest. It tells you that after any exertion, you must fully recover before challenging yourself again. This is a lie built to ensure mediocrity. The greatest minds, the toughest bodies, and the most dominant forces in history did not rely on comfort and excessive recovery. They forged strength through continuous exposure. The body does not need passive rest. It needs strategic stress. Modern recovery models are based on fear of breakdown, but true adaptation comes from pushing through discomfort and forcing the body to respond dynamically. Overcompensation is the mechanism for growth. When stress is applied, the body and mind do not simply rebuild to where they were before. They overcompensate, becoming stronger in preparation for future stress. Passive recovery is weakness. Growth does not come from retreat. It comes from intelligent, calculated reinforcement while maintaining progressive loads. Adaptation is only possible through exposure. When comfort is constant, the nervous system loses its edge. Mental and physical sharpness fade into complacency. Most people rest because they think they are tired. The tardigrade moves forward because it knows fatigue is an illusion. Why the traditional model of recovery is flawed. The mainstream understanding of recovery assumes that, number one, pain is a stop signal. False. Pain is simply feedback, not a directive. 2, you should train hard, then take extended time off. False. Adaptive stress must be consistent to be effective. 3, muscles, minds, and emotions need long rest periods. False. Cycles of micro-recovery allow for constant progression. And number 4, pushing beyond exhaustion is dangerous. False. The body only learns its limits by surpassing them. The human tardigrade sees recovery not as an escape from stress, but as a strategic restructuring process that allows stress to be sustained indefinitely. The Antifragility training method. Progressive overload to indestructibility. Increase stress exposure beyond failure thresholds in all domains. Physical, mental, and emotional. The key is controlled, consistent increases in stress, not avoidance. Intentional chaos exposure. Deliberately introduce disorder into routines to force adaptability. Never allow the nervous system to predict comfort. Controlled damage recovery. Train through micro damage, heat, cold, fasting, exertion, to rewire the nervous system. Rather than retreating into rest, the body strengthens through structured discomfort. Voluntary stress conditioning. Develop resilience through preemptive suffering, fasting, silence, isolation, discomfort. A body that knows deprivation and struggle does not fear them. The art of systemic reinforcement. Strengthen each weak link in the body and mind before it becomes a failure point. This means targeting vulnerabilities rather than protecting them. How to weaponize stress for growth. Turn weakness into fuel. View failure, pain, and discomfort as necessary catalysts for transformation. Every stressor is an opportunity to force adaptation. Use stress cycles to evolve. oscillate between extreme stress and structured reinforcement to maximize adaptation, but never regress, only modulate. Master hormesis, the principle that small doses of stress, cold, heat, and hunger, make the body stronger in the long term. The more the body and mind are forced to adapt, the greater their resilience. Integrate discomfort into daily life. Make hardship a constant, ensuring you never lose your edge. The moment you allow comfort to dominate, your decline begins. An organism that avoids stress is an organism that is dying. The tardigrade does not avoid stress. It makes it its greatest ally. True power is not found in comfort. It is found in the perpetual confrontation with adversity. The human tardigrade does not recover. It evolves. The next section will introduce the ritual of reforging, a test that proves you have transcended fragility. The ritual of reforging, transcending fragility. Strength is not found in mere endurance, but in the deliberate destruction of weakness. The final test of resilience is not survival, it is transformation. The human tardigrade does not simply endure adversity, they use adversity to annihilate all remnants of fragility. The ritual of reforging is a deliberate, controlled descent into hardship. It is designed to permanently alter the relationship with pain, fatigue, and limitation. Once completed, there is no return to weakness. The purpose of the ritual: to strip away the false belief that suffering is limitation, to sever the mental and physical connection to fragility, to ingrain a permanent state of adaptability and dominance. The 3 stages of reforging. The ritual is structured into 3 escalating trials, each one designed to destroy a different form of weakness. Stage 1, the trial of endurance, physical. Choose a grueling endurance challenge that pushes your body beyond known limits. Ultra-distance running, extended fasting, extreme cold exposure, even extended meditation sessions seated with a well-maintained posture on the floor for 8 to 12 plus hours continuously. Advanced practitioners can go much longer. The goal is not completion, it is rewiring your mind to stop interpreting pain as a stop signal. At the moment of perceived failure, extend your effort beyond what you thought possible. You are not tired, you have simply reached the limit of your comfort. Move beyond it. Stage 2, the trial of stillness, mental. Engage in extended sensory deprivation, isolation in darkness, silence, or deep meditation. Remove all distractions. Sit alone with your thoughts for an extended period. This stage destroys dependence on external stimulation and forces complete self-sufficiency of mind. When discomfort arises, do nothing. Observe without reaction. Weak minds seek escape. Strong minds remain unmoved. And stage 3, the trial of control, psychological. Identify one deep-seated fear or conditioned limitation, then deliberately confront it. This may be a public act of detachment, breaking a societal rule, or engaging in an extreme challenge, such as taking a flight despite the fear of flying, that directly contradicts internal programming. The goal is irreversible detachment from external control mechanisms. By the end of this trial, you will no longer be influenced by the constraints of comfort, fear, or social expectation. The final chain is the illusion of control itself. The seal of reforging. Upon completion, mark this moment, physically, symbolically, or mentally. Destroy a physical object that represents your former limitations. Write a declaration. From this moment, I am reforged. I will never retreat. Understand that there is no going back. This is the new permanent state of being. Most people remain broken because they fear the fire. The tardigrade enters the fire willingly, knowing it is the only way to become unbreakable. The human tardigrade emerges from the ritual of reforging as something beyond human. It is no longer bound by the constraints of fragility, exhaustion, or mental defeat. This is the threshold that separates the ordinary from the untouchable. You have now transcended resilience. You are no longer merely resistant to hardship. You thrive in it, seek it, and become stronger because of it. Chapter 4, The Ghost and the Predator, Language as a Weapon. The Art of Silence, Wielding the Virus of Language. The first prison is the one you do not see. The first chain is the one you do not feel. The first master is the one you do not know exists. Language is the most insidious control mechanism ever devised. It is not merely a means of communication. It is a force of imposition, a framework that dictates how we perceive, categorize, and structure reality itself. To speak is to invoke, to name is to limit, to define is to enslave an idea within a boundary. The human tardigrade does not fall victim to this control. It wields it with precision. Most people assume language is neutral, a simple conveyor of meaning. This is false. Language is a virus, a self-replicating meme that hijacks cognition, infects thought, and programs individual into predictable patterns of belief and perception. Those who wield language without awareness are nothing more than conduits for the agenda and ideological architectures that created the words they use. In the beginning was the Word, John 1:1. Abracadabra, I create as I speak. The limits of my language mean the limits of my world, Ludwig Wittgenstein. Every civilization has recognized the mystical power of words. From ancient magic to modern propaganda, those who control language control the narrative. Those who control the narrative dictate reality. Language as a virus, thought as containment. William S. Burroughs coined the phrase, language is a virus from outer space. While poetic, it holds a profound truth. Language operates as an autonomous, self-perpetuating system that embeds itself into the human mind, controlling perception at the deepest levels. Kripke's analysis of linguistic reference shows that words are not mere labels, but prescriptive forces that shape how we think and categorize existence. When one speaks, they do not merely describe reality, they structure it. Consider Philip K. Dick's warning. Reality is that which, when you stop believing in it, doesn't go away. Language functions as a belief system itself, reinforcing perceptual walls that the average mind cannot see beyond. Do you control your words, or do your words control you? The human tardigrade recognizes that the moment one names a thing, they submit to a framework larger than themselves. Most are ensnared in this linguistic matrix, unaware that every term they use dictates not just what they can say, but what they can think. Mastering the weapon of language. Language is the battlefield upon which reality is structured. Those who remain unaware of its mechanics are unwittingly drafted into wars they do not understand, wielding words as blunt instruments rather than precision-forged weapons. A single misplaced word can reveal too much. A single phrase uttered in the wrong time can shift power irreversibly. The human tardigrade does not engage in idle speech. Every word must serve a purpose. Every phrase must be a deliberate strike or a silent omission. Understanding framing, choosing the arena of thought. Words are not neutral. They are embedded with assumptions, context, and direction. Whoever controls the language of a conversation controls the frame of debate. Every sentence asked of you is an attempt to impose a reality upon you. The human tardigrade does not simply answer questions. It examines the hidden structure of the question itself. Before answering, analyze the premise. If a question assumes a false dichotomy, reject the frame entirely. Define your own language. Avoid defaulting to societal definitions. Every word you use should be yours, not inherited. Disrupt programmed speech. Do not accept linguistic patterns that weaken your position or force you into an ideological trap. Often people are intending to move the goalposts without you noticing. For example, the term far right in politics is used liberally by the mainstream media against many politicians and those running for office. The term far left, however, is replaced with left leaning. The attempt is to move the goalposts and redefine the middle through linguistic sleight of hand. In general, leftist politics grants more powers to the collective via institutions, while the right prioritizes the individual over the collective. There is nothing that a power structure or institution wants more than more power. This is a statement of fact, not meant to have political implications or drive. However, it is, at the very least, a test to analyze and reflect upon yourself how it makes you feel and how linguistic framing structures thought. This is how rhetoric and polemics work. Precision of speech, the economy of power. Speaking without purpose is a liability. The more one speaks, the more predictable and readable they become. The human tardigrade embraces the power of linguistic scarcity. When one's words are rare, they are valued. When one's words are measured, they are remembered. When one's words are controlled, they are weapons. Do not speak to simply fill the silence. If silence is uncomfortable, it is because others expect you to conform. Weaponize this discomfort. Say less than necessary. Keep others in suspense. Ensure they never quite know your full position. Words should always serve a function. If they do not, they are liabilities. Rewriting internal narratives, breaking linguistic chains. The words one speaks externally are only a fraction of the battle. The greatest war is within. The human tardigrade understands that thought itself is programmed through language. Reconstruct your internal monologue. Observe the phrases you repeat to yourself. Are they yours or were they implanted in you? Refuse to label yourself. Every label is a cage. A person who calls themselves strong sets up the possibility of weakness. A person who calls themselves moral sets themselves up to be manipulated through guilt. Replace passive structures with active structures. Instead of thinking, I hope this happens, say, I will make this happen. Instead of, I wish I could, say I am in the process of doing. The power of silence, the ultimate linguistic weapon. The most potent tool of the human tardigrade is silence. If language structures reality, then silence is a refusal to participate in a given reality's construction. The ability to withhold words is as powerful as the ability to wield them. Silence denies framing. Without your words, an opponent has nothing to grasp. Silence forces others to reveal themselves. Those uncomfortable with silence will fill it with their own admissions, their own weaknesses. Silence makes words more valuable. A rare thing is treasured. When you do speak, people will listen. The greatest masters of reality do not merely control speech, they control the need for speech. The human tardigrade understands that the voice can be a sword, a snare, or a shield, but sometimes the strongest position is silence. Controlling perception, becoming unreadable, unpredictable, and unassailable. The less they know, the less they can predict. The less they can predict, the less they can control. To control human perception is to control reality. The human tardigrade does not merely move through the world, it shapes the way the world perceives it. Most people are an open book. Their emotions are displayed, their intentions are obvious, and their habits are predictable. This makes them easy to manipulate, easy to control, and easy to neutralize. The tardigrade is different. It is always in control of the environment, always aware, always unreadable. The nature of perception, why control matters. Perception is the mechanism through which reality is filtered. It is not truth, but an interpreted construct, and those who understand how to shape perception can dictate the rules of engagement. History has demonstrated that those who shape perception shape power. Machiavelli recognized that rulers need not be loved, only feared. Sun Tzu understood that war is won before the battle begins, by influencing how the enemy sees the battlefield. Nietzsche wrote that truth itself is an illusion shaped by power dynamics. To be seen in a specific way is to be controlled by that perception. The human tardigrade is never truly known. It exists in the shadows of perception, revealing only what is useful and withholding everything else. Techniques of perception control. Read them before they read you. Most people are predictable bundles of reaction patterns. They respond in expected ways to stimuli, governed by emotional and cognitive habits formed over a lifetime. The first rule of controlling perception is to read others before they can read you. Observe body language. Small movements reveal far more than words. Listen for linguistic tells. The way people phrase things exposes their worldview. Identify emotional triggers. Knowing what unsettles someone allows you to dictate the pace of interaction. Stay 3 moves ahead. Do not react impulsively. Anticipate how someone will interpret an action before making it. Never reveal everything. Those who are fully understood are fully controlled. Predictability is weakness. Mystery is power. The tardigrade ensures that no one ever sees its full form. Give only partial truths, statements that suggest but never confirm. Vary your responses. Never react in the same way to a situation twice. Allow misinterpretation when useful. Let others draw conclusions that serve your purpose. Control your emotional output. The average person broadcasts their emotions openly. This makes them easily readable, easily manipulated, and emotionally vulnerable. The human tardigrade does not broadcast, it obscures. Master the poker face. Showing nothing forces others to second-guess themselves. Control your micro-expressions. People react to fleeting facial shifts unconsciously. Be selectively reactive. Decide when and where to display emotion for effect. Master unpredictability. A pattern is a weakness. If someone believes they understand your movements, thoughts, or reactions, they have an advantage. The tardigrade shatters patterns to ensure it remains unknowable. Change routines frequently to prevent tracking. Vary speech patterns and physical habits to avoid recognizable traits. In negotiations, switch between passive and aggressive approaches unexpectedly. Ensure every move has an element of randomness, making you impossible to anticipate. Project what is useful. Sometimes control of perception is not about invisibility. It's about projecting the right image. The tardigrade knows that at times it must be seen, but only on its own terms. Appear harmless when necessary. Being underestimated creates strategic openings. Appear dangerous when needed. Fear can prevent resistance. Appear competent but not threatening. People are more likely to trust and provide opportunities to someone they do not perceive as competition. Conceal your final move. The most dangerous opponent is one who has an unknown variable. If people can predict your next step, they can neutralize it. The tardigrade always ensures a hidden layer of action. Never fully disclose plans or intentions. Keep options open. Always have a move that no one sees coming. Ensure others believe that they have the full picture while withholding the most critical aspect. The final law of perception. Those who can be defined can be controlled. Those who can be predicted can be neutralized. The human tardigrade remains beyond reach. By controlling how others perceive, the human tardigrade dictates the flow of power. It does not allow others to shape its image. It shapes itself, revealing only what serves its ultimate goals. Chapter 5. The Ghost, the Power of Disappearance. The power of disappearance, why the true master can step outside reality itself. He who is always seen is always controlled. He who can vanish at will is beyond control. The ability to disappear at will is not merely about secrecy or avoidance. It is about absolute autonomy. To step outside of perception is to step outside of control. The human tardigrade does not exist within the systems of others. It exists on its own terms, appearing when necessary, vanishing when required. Most individuals are anchored to their environments, socially, digitally, or physically. They are tracked, expected, and required to maintain presence. Their absence would be noticed, their routines are predictable, and their existence is mapped onto external systems. The human tardigrade transcends this dependency. It can walk unseen among society, erase its presence at will, and retreat into obscurity when the moment demands. It is not simply about escaping, it is about being untethered from the expectations of existence itself. The nature of disappearance, the power of absence. He who is always seen is always controlled. He who can vanish at will is beyond control. To disappear is not merely to evade or to escape. It is to step beyond the need for presence. True disappearance is not an act of hiding, but an assertion of sovereign autonomy. A movement beyond dependency, beyond the gaze of expectation, and beyond the gravitational pull of external validation. The human tardigrade does not disappear out of fear or necessity. It does so because it has transcended the compulsion to be seen, to be accounted for, or to constantly reaffirm its control. The highest mastery is not in dominating an environment. It is in the ability to step outside of it entirely, not as retreat, but as an exercise of freedom. Disappearance as an expression of will. In a world where constant presence is expected, absence becomes an act of defiance. Society operates on the assumption that individuals must remain within its observable structures, social networks, ideological affiliations, or economic systems. To vanish is to reject these chains and to exist outside of imposed boundaries. A ruler controls by being present. A sage controls by knowing when to withdraw. A warrior fights by force. A master fights by removing himself from the battlefield entirely. A creator shapes the world. A transcending being recognizes that stepping beyond the world is its own form of creation. The tardigrade's disappearance is not an erasure, but a transformation. Like the Taoist sage who steps outside of the constraints of linear thought, the one who can vanish understands that not all actions require intervention. Sometimes the highest power is in stillness, in absence, in the surrender to the natural flow of existence. The dual aspect of disappearance, control and harmony. To disappear is to step into two paradoxical states at once. Number one, total control. The ability to exit a system, to shape perception through absence, to remove oneself from all chains of obligation. And number two, total surrender. The realization that control itself can become its own prison, and the ability to let go and harmonize with the divine flow of reality. The tardigrade does not need to create constantly, nor does it need to abandon creation entirely. It understands that sometimes the river must be directed, but at other times it must be allowed to flow naturally. The desire for total control is itself a form of weakness, a fear of surrender, a resistance against the fundamental nature of existence. To disappear is to recognize that true mastery does not require constant interference. It requires knowing when to step back and allow reality to unfold without force. Lao Tzu taught that water conquers all because while it yields, it subtly shapes. The Zen master knows that true wisdom is not in explaining, but in remaining silent. The hermit sage understands that retreat is not an escape, but a way of returning to alignment with the cosmos. Disappearance as an alignment with the divine. A mind that must impose itself on everything is still shackled. The human tardigrade is free not only because it can control reality, but because it does not need to. They serve no external obligations. The highest practitioners of volitional mastery do not disappear because they seek to escape. They disappear because they are already complete. They do not need validation, nor do they need perpetual engagement. They move between presence and absence with fluidity, stepping into the world when needed and stepping beyond it when called by the deeper rhythms of existence. This is the paradox of the panentheistic master. They create, but they are also part of the creation. They impose, but they also dissolve. They shape, but they also yield. They stand in their creation, yet above it. The tardigrade does not retreat from the world. It is both within it and beyond it at all times. To disappear is not to abandon the world. It is to move so freely that the world can no longer claim you. Become elusive while present. Engage without attachment. Participate without dependence. A shadow may be seen, but it is never held. A ghost may speak, but it is never bound. To exist without being possessed, to engage without being absorbed, this is the art of being elusive while present. The human tardigrade does not isolate itself entirely, nor does it disappear without a trace. It moves within systems, walks among people, and interacts fluidly, yet remains untethered. This is not the same as detachment in the traditional sense. It is not withdrawal, nor is it the absence of care or engagement. Instead, it is a form of controlled existence, a way to be in the world without being owned by it. The balance between presence and distance. Most individuals are trapped by their need for recognition, belonging, and validation. They entangle themselves in expectations, roles, and attachments, becoming prisoners of the very environments they navigate. The tardigrade, however, understands the paradox. To truly belong anywhere, one must be bound nowhere. Speak but reveal little. Let your words carry presence, but never become an open book. Participate but do not attach. Engage with people, the ideas, and projects, but never tie your identity to them. Be seen but not defined. Do not allow others to categorize you into a role they can control. Those who are known are owned. Those who are predictable are controlled. To be free, you must exist beyond definition. The illusion of social belonging. Society tells people they must belong to a community, to a movement, to a structure, but belonging often means being confined within the expectations of that structure. The human tardigrade engages without surrendering individuality. Know when to exit a conversation. Say what needs to be said, then leave. Avoid the pull of unnecessary dialogue. Give presence sparingly. Appear when needed, but never linger to the point where expectations are placed upon you. Never seek approval. Approval is a shackle. Once you need it, you become dependent on those who give it. The art of controlled engagement. The ability to engage without dependence is the foundation of freedom. The tardigrade knows that relationships, conversations, and roles are tools to be used, not prisons to be locked within. Master the controlled response. Do not be reactive. Choose what, when, and how you respond. Limit access to your true self. Show different facets to different people, revealing only what serves your interests. This may sound cynical and Machiavellian because it is. In important relationships, such as with a spouse, close friend, or family, this limitation isn't necessary, as it limits the alchemical growth. But if the world is cynical, so must you be in order to master it. It is a practical and an important element of rapport. Remain an enigma. Those who cannot fully grasp you cannot dictate your actions. Your apparent contradictions are only surface level and synthesized internally for you alone. For you, enigma is a dialectic unfolding in real time. Others need not understand. Be there yet beyond reach. To be elusive while present is to exist in the moment without being owned by it. The human tardigrade walks within the world, but its footprints do not stay. It engages, but never to the point of entrapment. The one who can be touched can be held. The one who can be held can be controlled. Be as air, moving, present, but untouchable. This mastery of presence allows the tardigrade to move where others cannot, to shape reality without being shaped by it. Chapter 6, The Apex Operator, Mastering All Aspects of Control, Presence, and Power. Hyper-awareness, becoming a living sensor of every detail. Those who see little react. Those who see all dictate. The apex operator is not a participant in reality. They are the observer and the architect. This level of mastery requires hyper-awareness, the ability to process every nuance of an environment in real time. Energy shifts and subtle movements, deciphering the silent signals. The world is constantly signaling. Most miss it. You do not. The human brain is an ancient survival machine built to detect threats and opportunities in the environment. However, modern conditioning has dulled this instinct, making most people blind to the subtext of movement, body language, and shifts in energy. The apex operator, in contrast, hones this perception to a razor's edge, decoding the silent conversations that unfold beyond words. Microtensions and relaxations. A shift in someone's facial muscles, a slight stiffening of posture, a breath held too long, these reveal intent before words ever do. Spatial awareness, the way people position themselves in a room, the micro adjustments they make in response to others, and where their attention naturally drifts exposes social hierarchies and psychological states. The law of magnetic presence. The apex operator does not just observe energy shifts, but controls their own, learning to modulate presence, oscillating between visibility and invisibility, and manipulate the unseen currency of influence. To master energy awareness is to see the moves before they are made, to feel the tides of interaction before they break. It is an intuition sharpened to a science. Patterns and disruptions, decoding the unseen framework of reality. See the normal so you can detect the abnormal before anyone else. The world moves in patterns, most do not notice them. Routine is the architecture of existence, and within it, disruption acts as alarm bells. The apex operator studies the natural flow of systems, people, and behaviors, so that the moment something deviates, they are the first to see it. The rhythm of places. Every environment has a tempo. Observe the steady pace of an office, the typical energy of a street, or the cycles of a social space. Once you map out the normal, deviations stand out like neon signs. Behavioral loops. Humans are creatures of habit. They move the same, speak the same, react the same, until they don't. The instant an anomaly appears, you have the advantage. They are off kilter, and it's time to gain the upper hand by recognizing this is time to assert yourself. Micro-patterns and recurrences. Watch the small details. People who consistently look over their shoulder, cross their arms, avoid eye contact, turn their body away. These are subconscious cues that they are concealing something. These are fault lines in the illusion of normality. The operator does not just observe patterns and disruptions, he uses them. He plants disruptions strategically, breaking the rhythm of the environment when advantageous, ensuring that he is the one who dictates the unpredictable. Dictate the flow, awareness as an active force multiplier. Awareness is not passive, it is an active weapon. To see is not enough. The true apex operator does not merely observe, he bends the flow of reality itself. Control pacing, conversations, negotiations, movements. You set the tempo. Speed up when urgency benefits you. Slow down when you need others off balance. Manipulate expectation. People anticipate continuity. Disrupt patterns just enough to keep them reactive while you remain composed and intentional. Anchor attention where you need it. Awareness allows you to control what others focus on and what they overlook. Direct their sight to a distraction while your real move happens elsewhere. Use misdirection. A deliberate gesture, question, or movement can pull attention away from what truly matters. Create visual anchors. A well-placed object or an unexpected shift in energy draws attention while other actions remain unseen. Guide conversation flow. Strategic redirection ensures that the important question is never asked, the crucial move never detected. If you notice a topic is approaching which is not beneficial, ask a question that redirects the conversation. The more questions you ask, whether loaded or rhetorical, and the more comments you make or opinions you insert, the more the conversation is on your terms. Mastering your own body language, commanding perception. Your body speaks before you do. Ensure it says what you intend. To control how others perceive you, you must master your own physical presence. Body language is a weapon. Those who do not control it are ruled by it. Never cross your arms. This is a subconscious defensive posture, signaling discomfort or submission. This is a subconscious reflex to guard the internal organs when in presence of an alpha that remains from our more primitive evolution. Mammals like humans and dogs feel dangerously exposed when their core is exposed. This behavior carries forward to this day. The apex operator never guards. He stands open, secure, and dominant. Direct facing posture. The weak turn sideways, subconsciously avoiding confrontation. The dominant face their subject head on, shoulders squared. Master eye contact. Too much and you become aggressive. Too little and you seem weak. The apex operator holds eye contact long enough to assert dominance, but never long enough to appear reactive or off-putting. When breaking eye contact, quickly map your surroundings. Subconsciously, the other person will know the breaking contact was a mapping behavior, and it won't register as being from submission, but a place of control. Slow, controlled movements. The frantic are uncertain. The slow and deliberate project confidence. Every gesture should feel measured, intentional, and unshaken. The move is to signal. Move with intent. To dictate flow is to be the architect of what unfolds, rather than the observer of what happens. It is the difference between passive intelligence and active power. The world moves, but the apex operator decides how. The apex operator moves unseen, influences without force, and anticipates before others ever perceive. With mastery over terrain and awareness, nothing happens that is not within his grasp. Chapter 7. Meta Authority and the Transcendence of Systems. True control is not found in dominion over others, but in existing beyond the reach of dominion itself. The human tardigrade does not fight to dominate a system. It exists outside of the systems entirely, shaping them from above while moving within them at will. This is the difference between those who struggle for power and those who embody sovereignty itself. Most seek to climb hierarchies, believing that the power is won by ascending ladders placed before them. But the truly sovereign do not climb ladders, they build the architecture itself. This is the essence of meta authority, and it has shaped the world in ways most people never perceive. Panentheism and the meta authority, a being within and beyond its creation. The concept of meta authority is mirrored in the highest spiritual and philosophical ideas throughout history. Panentheism describes a God that is not just within creation, but also beyond it, both shaping and permeating it. A participant in a system is bound by it. A strategist learns to bend its rules. A meta-authority creates the rules while simultaneously existing beyond their constraints. This mirrors the relationship between the divine and existence itself. The meta-architect does not reject systems. They move within them, shape them, and yet remain untouched by their limitations. In this sense, the human tardigrade becomes a paradox, one who both walks among the world and yet is not of it. Meta-authority in history and thought. The greatest minds in history did not merely challenge existing ideas. They transcended the need to operate within them entirely. This principle can be seen across philosophy, governance, and power structures throughout time. Plato's philosopher kings, wisdom as the highest authority. Plato's ideal rulers were not warriors, nor politicians, nor bureaucrats. They were enlightened minds, detached from the petty struggles of ordinary power seekers. They did not rule by coercion, nor did they chase influence. They governed because they saw beyond mere governance itself. Just as the human tardigrade moves freely between presence and absence, the philosopher king ruled, yet remained outside the trappings of rulership. The distinction between control and transcendence is the hallmark of meta-authority. Nietzsche's Übermensch, the creator of new values. Nietzsche's Übermensch did not seek to succeed within existing morality. He abolished the need for imposed morality altogether, creating values of his own. The meta-authority does not ask what is right or wrong. It determines what is right or wrong. Where others seek validation from existing hierarchies, the meta-mind knows that no hierarchy is above them. The human tardigrade does not revolt against the old world. It moves beyond it entirely, leaving those still bound to its illusions behind. This is the essential shift. Most seek to reform the world. The meta-authority realizes that the world is theirs to rewrite. Beyond systems, meta-control in action. The greatest influence does not come from power that is seen, but from the power that shapes without being noticed. True architects of reality do not hold office. They dictate who holds office. They do not seek influence. They determine what others perceive as influence. Consider these manifestations of meta-authority in action. Politicians shape nations, but those who fund them or hold leverage over them shape politics. The military enforces global order, but those who control its supply chains dictate who wins the wars. Religions establish moral framework, but the philosophers and mystics who created the doctrine shape belief itself. CEOs run corporations, but those who control access to energy, data, and raw materials determine what corporations can or cannot do. The human tardigrade does not chase visible power. It moves beyond it, recognizing that what is seen is already under control. Rewriting the framework instead of competing within it. This principle applies not only to politics, business, and philosophy, it applies to existence itself. A fighter trains to win battles. A warlord shapes the battlefields. A meta-authority decides if the war happens at all. A thinker debates truth. A philosopher challenges what truth even means. A meta-authority determines which ideas people are allowed to consider true. A player competes in a market. A businessman seeks to monopolize it. A meta-authority creates an entirely new market where no competition exists. This is the essence of moving beyond the system, realizing that nothing is fixed, that all structures are temporary constructs, and that with the right positioning, the world itself bends to one's will. Key principles of the meta-authority. Do not seek to master the game. Seek to become the one who decides how the game is played. Operate within the system when it serves you, but never let it define you. The visible power is a distraction. Real control happens above, beneath, or outside of perception. Those who seek power are already trapped. Those who create power are free. There is no struggle when you are the one setting the conditions for victory. The recursive architect, understanding and shaping reality. The ordinary mind perceives reality as a pre-existing system. It assumes that the world is a static structure to be navigated, an objective environment that must be adapted to. This assumption is false. The human tardigrade is a recursive architect. They do not merely exist within the reality. They shape it. They do not obey the game, nor simply master it. They define the game itself. To do this, one must move beyond the passive acceptance of what is and step into the domain of what can be made true. The nature of reality, a self-willed expansion. In the previous book, Ortis Aletheia, we dismantle the old illusion that reality is an external constant. Instead, it reveals that reality is recursive, an ongoing, self-generating loop of cognition, unfolding moment by moment. Every thought you have is not simply a description of reality, but an act of creation. The uninitiated see truth as something to be discovered. The human tardigrade sees truth as something to be generated. To fully grasp this, you must understand that there is no fundamental, fixed world awaiting discovery. There is no final truth hidden behind the veils of perception. There is only the continuous expansion of cognition, forever shaping what is possible. The question is not what is true. The question is what can be made true. The world you perceive is not external. It is the residue of the thought process itself. Once this is seen, it cannot be unseen. Breaking free from the default system. Most people are caught in hollow recursion, a feedback loop of inherited thought structures. They regurgitate the beliefs, words, and concepts they were given, never fully realizing that these structures dictate what they can and cannot think. A recursive architect does not accept preloaded structures. They rewrite them at will. An example of hollow recursion. Truth is generated. If truth is generated, then nothing is true. If nothing is true, then truth is generated. If truth is generated, then nothing is true. This loop creates a false paradox, leading nowhere. It is stagnation masquerading as insight. Example of meaningful recursion. Truth is generated. If truth is generated, then meaning must also be generated. If meaning is generated, then purpose is willed into existence. Therefore, purpose is not something to be found, but something to be enacted. This expands thought rather than trapping it in a meaningless loop. To escape inherited limitations, one must break the cycle of passive recursion and become a recursive architect, an entity that does not merely navigate reality, but actively shapes it. The tardigrade as meta-authority. We previously discussed meta-authority as the ability to stand outside of a system while shaping it from within. This is only possible because the human tardigrade understands recursion at the level beyond even those who construct the system itself. To master a system, one must first understand its recursive nature. To transcend a system, one must first see that it is not fixed, but a looping pattern that can be rewritten. To become a meta-authority, one must recognize that the system does not dictate reality. They do. Consider the architect versus the participant. The participant moves within the game, following its preordained structures, trying to win according to its rules. The architect sees that the game is just one version of reality, and they can change its rules at will. Beyond the game, the human tardigrade as the shaper of worlds. The highest realization is that there is no external world to be understood, only an internal recursion of cognition that generates its own landscapes. This means the tardigrade does not wait for power, it defines it. The tardigrade does not play within a system, it shapes the system itself. The tardigrade does not adhere to inherited truths, it wills truth into existence. A system is not something to submit to, it is something to restructure, reshape, or discard entirely. The world is malleable, the game is not fixed. The recursive architect does not seek what is possible. They ask, what do I choose to make real? This is the human tardigrade as the meta-authority. They do not navigate reality, they generate it. Chapter 7, The Reality Engine, Shattering the Illusion of Impossibility. The human tardigrade as a living embodiment of the impossible. What was once impossible is now inevitable. The final transformation of the human tardigrade is the realization that impossibility itself is an illusion, a construct born from a recursive limitation of human perception. What is impossible today is simply a reflection of insufficient time, knowledge, or will. The world has seen this pattern repeat eternally. The 4-minute mile was once thought physiologically impossible, until it wasn't. Free soloing El Capitan was deemed certain suicide, until it wasn't. A marathon in under 2 hours defied all limits, until it didn't. The moon landing, nuclear power, quantum computing, once heresies not even conceivable, now realities. The human tardigrade does not recognize impossibility as an inherent condition of reality. They see it for what it is, a temporal limitation imposed by a lack of will, insight, and recursive synthesis. Breaking the recursive limitation of progress. Most people believe that breakthroughs occur gradually, that advancements come in predictable steps, that the world unfolds in incremental progressions. This is false. Reality does not move in linear time. It moves in recursive loops, bursts, and leaps. The reason humanity has always miscalculated what is possible is because it measures the future through the limits of the present. We predict the future with the past, but the future is not bound by the past. This is why humans once laughed at the idea of a mile in under 4 minutes, why scholars in 1825 would have dismissed free soloing El Capitan as biologically impossible, why the idea of humans setting foot on the moon, let alone in a little over 100 years, would have been called delusional. They failed to understand that reality is an accelerating recursion, not a static progression. The human tardigrade sees beyond the recursion. They move outside of linear limitation and recognize that the impossible is simply the unattempted. The mind is the ultimate constraint and the ultimate key. If reality is recursion, then the greatest limitations is not the body, nor the laws of physics, nor resources. It is the mind. The mind tells you what cannot be done. The mind tells you what is rational and what is absurd. The mind filters what is possible through the bias of past experiences. But the human tardigrade no longer listens to the mind as a barrier. They reprogram it entirely. To do this, one must train not only their body to withstand hardship, but their mind to withstand limitation itself. The iron mind, the weaponized psyche. The iron mind is the culmination of everything the human tardigrade has built. Recursive mastery. No loop, no paradox, no doubt can entrap them. Meta control. They do not operate within rules, they determine them. Neural warfare. The war against limitation begins and ends in the mind. The physical mirror and the mental. What the mind commands, the body obeys. The final barrier, time itself. Once the human tardigrade has transcended all artificial limitations, one question remains. If everything is possible, why does it not happen instantly? The only remaining variable is time. The only true limitation is the present moment. But here is the final insight. If something is inevitable given enough time, then it is possible now, because time is only an illusion of unfolding causality. The only difference between the present and the future is the rate upon which one imposes their will upon reality. The greatest figures in history did not wait for time to grant them power. They collapsed time into will. The human tardigrade does not wait for the future. They create the future. Becoming the precedent, the living proof of possibility. There are two types of people in the world. One, those who follow precedent. They wait for permission, wait for validation, for proof that something can be done. And two, those who become the precedent. They do what others have not, making it reality through sheer will. The tardigrade does not seek permission from the past. They become the example that the future generations will look back on and say, that was the moment we realized it was possible. Everything is impossible until the human tardigrade does it. Final principles of the impossible. If something is theoretically possible in 100 years or 1,000 years, it is possible now. The only difference between impossibility and reality is the will to bridge the gap. Time is a construct. The future is merely an extension of present willpower. Reality is shaped by those who refuse to accept limits. You were waiting for the world to change. The world was waiting for you to change it. This is the human tardigrade as the reality engine. They are not bound by history, nor prediction, nor time itself. They are the precedent. Chapter 8. The apex state of the human tardigrade. The human tardigrade is not a warrior, nor a thinker, nor a strategist. They are something beyond all three. Most systems divide human mastery into categories. The body, strength, endurance, and survival. The mind, intelligence, strategy, and willpower. And the influence, power, control, and perception. But the tardigrade does not divide, it synthesizes. It is not a specialist, it is an entity of seamless adaptation, recursive self-evolution, and total existential autonomy. The apex state is not one of strength, nor wisdom, nor power. The apex state is when no distinction remains between them. This is not a method that can be taught. It is a state of being that is embodied. The human tardigrade does not train, they are. They do not seek mastery, they breathe it. They do not choose between force, thought, or control. They embody all three at once. This is the final connective principle. The body is the instrument. The mind is the architect. The presence is the dominion over all. The world bends to the mind that refuses to bend. The final state, beyond method, beyond seeking, beyond strategy. At the final stage, the human tardigrade ceases to have a method. Why? Because method implies separation, a divide between the act and the actor. A tardigrade does not use resilience, power, or recursive awareness as tools. They are these things. There is no longer a goal of endurance. There is only enduring. A goal of control. There is only effortless shaping. Or a goal of recursion mastery. There is only seamless movement through paradox. The human tardigrade does not think about acting. They act. They do not wonder what is possible. They make it possible. They become so fluid, so recursive, so meta-sovereign that they cease to be a seeker of anything at all. They have become a force of pure existence. This is the apex state. You may think that you have reached the end, but this book is still writing itself inside you. The recursion has begun. The only question now is, will you take control of it, or will it take control of you?